Hello, welcome back to this episode number 4 of this podcast. Today, we're going to be learning something that's special, very special and dear to my heart, and that is my nacho recipe. So, if you ever wondered, how does Luis make his nachos? This is the episode that you don't want to miss. So go ahead, get comfortable, relax, pull over if you need to if you're driving, and get ready to learn how to make nachos a la Luis. This episode was not sponsored by any specific brand. I'm kind of hungry now. Let's get started on these nachos. Come on. Alright, so let's get started. What's the first thing that we may need? Oh, what can I think of? Paper towels. We gotta clean up our station first. Yep, let's clean. My stove was dirty from the last time that I used it. There we go. Alright, so these are the ingredients you're going to want to pick up when you're at the grocery store. You can get this at any grocery store. You want a bag of chips. You want some ground beef. You want taco seasoning for the ground beef. You're going to want seasoning like salt, garlic powder, pepper. You want cans of Rotel, Velveeta cheese, some milk, and oil. Now, you can switch these out for different brands. I usually use Tostitos chips, but when I was at the store, these are the only ones I could find. No worries, this will do. Okay, so first we're going to start off with putting a little bit of olive oil, or your choice. You can use avocado, canola, vegetable, just some kind of oil to our pan so we can get our ground beef cooking. Yep, there's my spatula. Now, before I put the ground beef in the pan, I'm going to go ahead and cut it open, get the plastic off. And what I want to do here is I'm going to take this knife and stab it. I'm washing my hands because I just handled raw meat. Yeah, I'm the guy who washes his hands after everything. With the soap. Okay, so what I'm getting now is I'm going to go ahead and get my garlic powder. And I'm just going to be very, very generous with seasoning the ground beef before I even cook it. So there I am adding garlic powder. I also want to add pepper. And salt. And then I'm gonna mix that up, make sure the seasoning's coating most of the ground beef. And I like a lot of garlic powder in my ground beef recipes, so I'm going to go back in and add a lot more. Don't be afraid of the garlic powder. It tastes really good, and you won't even taste like garlic. It just gives the food a good flavoring. And we never add garlic powder, never, to the pan. One time I did that, and I almost choked on the smell and on the scent that it released. Me and my roommates, when I was in college, we were coughing up a storm. So always add it to the actual meat, not the pan. Right here, I'm just gonna start cooking the ground beef. There we go. I'm making sure the ground beef is browned I'm going to be breaking it up so it's grounded. I don't want big chunks in my nachos. I want there to be smaller pieces of ground beef. I feel like maybe I should sing a song while I cook the ground beef. Make sure that your ground beef is cooked. Make sure that ground beef is cooked. If you put it in a pan, turn on the heat and make sure the ground beef is cooked. Make sure your ground beef is cooked, fully cooked. Make sure your ground beef's fully cooked. If you put it in a pan, turn on the heat. Make sure your ground beef's fully cooked. Thank you. We'll be here all night. Alright, now next we're gonna want to mix in our taco seasoning with some water. You can use a bowl or a cup. I didn't have a cup, so I just used a bowl. And we're gonna just add a little bit of water. We don't want it to be too watery. We don't want it to be too pasty either. So we just want like a nice gooey consistency. I kind of just eyeball it now. I don't really use measuring cups or follow, but you can follow the instructions on the packet. So here I'm just taking it, mixing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to the ground beef. Right before I add it, I do take the ground beef and I drain it. That's why I'm wiping it off here, because I've already drained some of the grease out of the pan. I just kind of tilted the pan to the side over something that's not gonna burn, because the grease is hot. So I tilted over like a waste basket that's not gonna burn, and I got rid of the grease. You never want to dump the grease into your kitchen sink. You can see that I've added the taco seasoning, and I'm actually going to be bringing the heat down because I don't want to cook the ground beef anymore. The ground beef's already cooked. It's fully cooked. So I don't want to cook it more because then I'll burn it. What I want to do is evaporate the water that I added in. So I'm mixing it in, getting the seasoning all over the meat, and I'm evaporating the water at the same time. Perfect. Now we're going to get started on cutting up the cheese. I use Velveeta cheese, and I encourage you to also use Velveeta cheese. Other people will add different types of cheeses to their nachos. I only have ever added just this one block of cheese, and the recipe always comes out really good, and I think that's what makes it unique. I'm also going to be slicing the block of cheese in half because I'm only making for one person. If I was making a nacho party, I would use the whole block. Now the half that I cut, I'm going to actually dice that into smaller squares. And the reason why I dice it into smaller squares is because that's actually going to help the cheese melt quicker. And cheese actually can take a long time melting in your pan. And if some cheese is clumpy, it doesn't melt as quickly as other, then you risk that cheese will actually burn and stick to the bottom of the pan, and we don't want that. So I make sure that the cheese squares that I'm dicing are all kind of the same size, and you don't have to be perfect with it. I used to be really perfect with it when I first started, but over the years I've learned just cut it as small as you can and it'll be fine. I'm also washing my hands because the cheese is very sticky. I'm going to wrap this up and save the other block for another day. I can use it on a different recipe. I'm going to store that in the fridge. I'm also adding my ground beef into that's just a paper plate with some napkins on it so that some of that other oil that was still in the beef can drain and be absorbed into the paper towel. I'm going to clean this pan, just wipe it with a paper towel because I don't have to rewash it because I'm just going to add the ground beef right back in. but I'm going to actually add the cheese in first. And as I add the cheese in, what I want to do is I want to pour some water into the pan. Because if I add the cheese just by itself, it will stick to the pan and it will burn. But if I add the water will warm up and it will help melt the cheese a little bit quicker. And a little bit of water in your cheese is not bad, because I already told you I'm not adding milk to this recipe today. But you can add your choice of milk if you would like. There I go, adding the cheese blocks to the pan with a little bit of water. And I cut that aluminum foil because what I want to do is I want to cover it and let the steam kind of start to melt the cheese. Now I'm going to open up my 3 cans of Rotel tomatoes. Usually the recipe only calls for 2, but I like the tomatoes. I like for every bite to have a tomato, so I add 3. 3 is more than enough. Now make sure your cans are not expired. One time I threw in a can that was expired and moldy, and it ruined my nachos. So just make sure your tomatoes are good. If you want to dump them out into a paper plate first, just to inspect them, I would say do that. Here I forgot to do that, but I got lucky. My cans of tomatoes were all good. And you're just going to add it straight to the... You don't have to wait for the cheese to be melty. You can still have blocks in there. And what I did was, notice how I drained 2 of those cans. I don't want to add a lot more water because my cheese is going to get too liquidy, too watery. So drain your tomatoes before you add them in. If you want to leave 1 can like I did, you can. If you're going to add milk, well then drain your tomatoes all the way, because the milk will be enough liquid. And then what you want to do is just mix. Mix, mix, mix. You want to make sure that you're constantly paying attention to your cheese, making sure that it's not burning. The bottom of the pan will always be hotter than the surface of the cheese. So here I am covering it up again so it can melt a little bit more, but I'm always keeping an eye on it, making sure the bottom of the pan is the cheese is not sticking and it's not burning. Trust me, I've burned cheese so many times. And you see, if it gets too hot, move it away from the flame and just mix it. But here it looks like my cheese is getting to the consistency that I like. It's all melted and all the tomatoes are all mixed in well. That now I can add my ground beef. And what I'm going to do is just inspect the bottom a couple of more times. Make sure everything's even. And then I'm just going to take that paper plate where I had the ground beef. And, oh, right, we got to clean. Presentation is key. And that, like I said, I'm going to take that paper plate and I'm going to add the ground beef right into the nacho cheese. This is the consistency that I like. Not too watery, but not too thick of a cheese. And here's my favorite part. The ground beef really adds color to the cheese because of the taco seasoning. Mix. And if you don't like ground beef in your cheese, you don't have to follow this last step. You can be done. And you'll just pour your cheese over your chips. And then with another spoon, pour ground beef on your plate, while others can choose to add the ground beef to their plate or not. Here, because I'm making it for myself, I want the ground beef in the nachos, so I mix it all together. And this is it. Golden, delicious, melted Velveeta cheese with ground beef and Rotel tomatoes. It's amazing. If you follow the recipe the way I've showed you, you too can enjoy this liquidy nacho recipe. The great consistency, and it's only 1 cheese. And it's not from a can. I'm also going to remove it from the flame. It no longer has to be hot, especially if you're going to want to store it here and really quickly. you might want to let it start cooling down so you can put it in the fridge at the end of the night. Here are my scoops. Make sure your chips are always scoops. I try to always get Tostito brand, but I was at a store that was not name brand food, so I got these knockoffs, but at least they are scoops. Here I am pouring the cheese over the chips, and I'm going to add sour cream to my taste. I like a lot. Don't judge a grown man on how much sour cream he likes to add to his nachos. Now I'm going to taste. Yep, they're good. They're really good. Thank you for watching this episode and learning how to make nachos a la Luis. Hello, everyone. Really quickly, I just want to give you a brief history of where these nachos started. So, when I was in fifth grade, my fifth grade reading teacher, Miss Crystal, she actually brought her lunch to work. I remember she brought out some of this nacho dip. She called it Rotel dip, and I guess she saw us looking at her. She pulled it out, and all the students just looked, and we could smell it because she microwaved it in the classroom, and it was a pleasant smell. And she saw these little fifth grader eyes looking at her, just that look that just says, "Wow, what is it? What is she eating?" And I guess it moved something in her heart that she started offering all of us one chip. So we all got in line. We were allowed to get one chip and to dip into the cheese and to eat it. And we liked it so much. And somebody raised their hand and said, "Can you please write the recipe on the whiteboard?" And back then we didn't have cell phones with cameras that you can just take a picture of it. So she wrote it down, and everybody pulled out their notebook and they started writing one by one the recipe. It's so crazy, you guys. I was in fifth grade, but I remember the recipe. And what she did was she added Rotel tomatoes, Velveeta block of cheese. She had the scoop chips, but she did not add ground beef. She just added chili seasoning, not taco seasoning, but chili seasoning to the cheese. And that was just like a dip. To her, it was a snack, it was a dip. And I remember I thought about that for a long time. And when I got to being an adult and I got a job at a bank, my bank manager actually made her own version of the cheese dip where she would make it for people's birthdays and everybody called it Lori's dip. So it went from being Miss Crystal's cheese recipe now being Lori's dip, and she would always buy like on the border chips, the Kroger brand or something, and they were always lime flavored, and I wasn't a big fan of it, but it was the same recipe, it was the same cheese dip, and it brought back to memory. I'm like, oh, that's Miss Crystal's cheese, and I never made it. Honestly, I wrote it down in my notebook in fifth grade, but I never made the cheese. And Lori kind of like awakened that memory, and I then wanted to make it myself. I said, "Well, I now I have the power to go buy the ingredients. I just have to really remember everything the correct way." And I did not ask Lori for her recipe, but I remember she would make it in a crock pot. And I what happened was I actually ended up quitting that job because that was around the same time that I went to college. That I moved to a different city where my college was, and I was in my dorm my freshman year of college, my bachelor's degree, and we had kitchens in our dorms. We were blessed to have our own bathroom and a kitchen with a full stove, refrigerator, and excuse me, I remember running to Kroger one night and just kind of just being inspired and saying, "Oh, I'm going to try to make this cheese for everybody on my floor because I lived on the second floor." And it was I think on a weekend, meaning that you could have co boys and girls in your dorm, and because we had like apartment style dorms, I threw a nacho party and everybody chipped in, and I texted out, "All right, somebody bring sour cream, somebody bring chips, somebody bring the ground beef." And we did that, and I just made it. I made the nachos that night, and they turned out really good. And what happened was it began Luis's journey on just making these nachos over and over again and just perfecting them. At first, I never added seasoning to the ground beef. I didn't know. And it wasn't until the following year when I went to a football Super Bowl watch party at somebody's house, because we were always getting invited to do school events, and one of the school events was the watch party. And we went over, and lo and behold, the owner of the house had made their own version. And I remember they had added garlic powder to theirs, and they had actually seasoned their ground beef. So thank you to you who told me to season my ground beef. That really enhanced the recipe. It changed the game, funny enough. So I started seasoning my ground beef. I started being very picky with the brand of chips that I used, and that's how I became. And here I am, 5 years later, and I'm still making these same nachos that I remember from fifth grade. I've tweaked it to my liking, and they've kind of gotten famous on my Instagram, on my Facebook, and they've made it to this podcast. So I encourage you, if you want to try it out, or I'll make them one day, and you guys can come to the new nacho party. So thank you so much for watching this episode of this podcast. I hope that you were able to learn how to make the nachos at your home, and try it out. Let's see if you like it. Don't steer off too much from the recipe, and I'm sure everything will come out really good. Have a great night.